welcome back to episode 28 of Tall Boy Radio. This week, we're going to do something that we've been avoiding doing on all the other podcasts, where we've avoided talking about the more miserable issues out there. We've kept it pretty upbeat, but 2020, it's been a bit of a dire year. So we're going to talk about some of the issues that's been facing us this year. But before we do that, though, we need to put something to rights from the last episode, because the ill-informed could watch that video that we put out on YouTube or listen to the audio podcast and think that we were shown up by a couple of girls eating spicy peanuts and we were struggling. I've since revisited that, and I'm telling you now, if you eat one peanut, you're fine. You're fine. It stings a little bit. You go 2 or 3 in, you're in a world of trouble. So don't. We've let that be for a week, and this hasn't gone out yet, so no doubt we'll get some abuse about that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, nonetheless. So we're going to start off, as we always start off, by saying our hellos and telling us a little bit about what we're drinking this week.
So hi guys, good to be back again. And this week I'm drinking one of my favourite beers, which is a Birra Moretti out of a TBR glass.
Way. Andy? Way. And because you've had your holiday now in Cornwall. Did you have a good time, dude?
Yeah, it was all right. And it was it's sunny there all week. Most of the week. And then when it was like the heat wave that Friday, pissed it down.
Well, I saw you shared plenty of pictures of the cider while you're down there, the Rattler and everything. They look pretty good. The other thing, before we get to what I'm drinking, Gaz, you should technically be in Menorca now, should you not?
Yes, yeah. Should have gone on Saturday, but obviously thanks to the 10 people that arrived back from Spain or wherever it was with COVID symptoms, the government decided to place a blanket lockdown on the Balearics, depending on how you pronounce it, and as well as the Canaries. So we did manage to reschedule, so we actually fly to Greece on Saturday, and we're now going for 11 days to Greece. So sort of a bit bittersweet. We don't get to go away with the in-laws, so the kids are a little bit.
That's the sweet part. What's the bitter part?
The kids were a bit upset about that, but we sort of built up to going, and then obviously decided that due to FCO guidelines and guidance, whatever, that we wouldn't be allowed to. So I'm frantically trying to sort of reschedule, and we picked something up, which is nice. So it means I can be here, which is great.
That's it, and we're going to record another 2 episodes so that we can have Gaz on for the next couple of weeks while he's stunning himself up with Greece, and let's hope that all goes forward.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
The beer I'm drinking is Beavertown Lupuloid IPA, which is an absolute gem. I think we said last time I do love an IPA. This one's 6.7%, so hopefully it won't descend into the madness that we had over the last couple of episodes. But nonetheless, this is a beaut, and £2.40 now in Sainsbury's local and in all stages, so that's a winner.
Nice. You do like your Beavertown, don't you?
I love Beavertown.
Yeah,
I particularly that one as well. So this episode is Gary's brainchild, and you suggested this one. You put it forward because got to the point. We've talked about plenty of other things, but one of the things we haven't really acknowledged is everything that's happened so far this year. Difficult to believe that only 7 months in, and it's been a pretty dismal 7 months, hasn't it? How have you experienced it then? We start off by saying how you've experienced it work-wise. We're not going to share who we work for, obviously, we said, but how has it affected your work life and your home life?
I mean, when we were first aware of sort of COVID and this, and for those that aren't aware, I work in education, so and we sort of felt as though we were sort of talking, and the work staff were talking, and it was like, well, it'll be probably the week. They'll probably close school for like a week before Easter. They'll probably maybe have like 2 weeks over Easter, and then they'll probably just close it for like a week after Easter just to make sure, and then everything will be back to normal. And then obviously like 5 months down the line or whatever we are, obviously we're now in the middle of our sort of summer holidays for the listeners in America. Obviously we're in the middle of our 6 week summer holiday, due to go back sort of 2nd or 3rd of September. So it's been weird. The first couple of weeks I wasn't in at all, and basically we didn't have any kids in school. I work in a school, a sort of independent special school, and we didn't have any kids in. And the head was very keen on sort of going to do planning and your prep and stuff for next year. And then it got to a point where actually we went in on a rota. So I would be in like 2 days a week, and then a couple of the staff were in 2 days a week. And we just basically did it on a rota just so that we could sort of get things done. But we didn't have any kids in for sort of 5 or 6 weeks in the middle bit, really. And then it's only the last few weeks where we've started to have 1 or 2 kids sort of back with us. We haven't got a massive number of kids on our roll, so we're not a mainstream, so we haven't got like 1,000 kids. So we've got some 25, 30 kids on roll, and they all have sort of various needs and specific needs. So we have had a couple of kids that have been back in, but it's been weird. Yeah, it's been hard. We've been setting work to be sent home, so we've been setting like work packs and stuff, and the type of kids that we have at our school, let's just say they're probably not the most able at sort of engaging online in terms of sort of doing Skype lessons and stuff like that. So it was difficult sort of setting work that was effectively some paper-based work. And for me, who teaches IT, that was quite challenging, really. So that was a bit of a sort of learning curve, thinking, wow, how can I set work? How can I challenge these kids? But set it in such a way that if they haven't got access to a computer, they can still do it on paper. So just really, we went from, as I said, it'll only be a couple of weeks to, actually, you know what, this actually probably will be a bit bigger than we all first thought. And now months later, we're sort of, we're still in it. I'm looking forward 2-3 weeks down the line. I'm still not exactly sure what's going to happen in September.
No.
I genuinely still don't know. And for those colleagues of mine and friends of mine who work in mainstream, I still don't understand how you can get 1,000 kids in a mainstream school all effectively socially distanced. And I know they said it doesn't really apply in school, but how do you break time, lunch times? I just don't see how they're going to do it. So I'd be interested to see what they do decide and stuff, what they do say. But it's been hard, it's been strange, unprecedented. Completely unprecedented.
Absolutely. And Andy, how's it affected you?
It's been a positive one for myself because I work in IT. So anyway, generally my job's been office based. So with Dave on the commute and everything like that. So it's been alright. Can't complain. I don't have to leave the house or anything like that. We've got a few bits done around the house, but I don't know. I think there's people a lot worse, have it a lot worse than I do. I work from home every so often anyway, before COVID or whatever. So it just means I don't have to get dressed. I do that way.
Just to clarify, you are dressed now, yeah? Waist up
from the waist up.
Cool. I mean, for me, I work in retail, so it's been peculiar because I've worked through the whole of this pandemic, whatever you want to call it, and same as Gaz sort of thought, it's like, this is getting a bit annoying. This great because they reduced our opening hours, so it meant I could get up later in the morning, and the shop was closed earlier at night, which kept the night staff happy. But yeah, it's been strange. Probably it's affected the wife a little bit more. She was on maternity leave, just gone back into work, but she hasn't gone back into work. She, same as yourself, works in IT, frequently work from home, and actually now is permanently working from home, and has been told is unlikely to be back in the office before New Year.
Wow.
So
okay.
yeah, that and her role as well, she can do it pretty much. She manages teams in about 2 or 3 different countries, so she can do that from home just as easily. If you look in our spare bedroom now, it's like, I don't know whether she's hacking into the White House or doing a job most days, because there's a lot of IT equipment up there. So yeah, it's been strange, hasn't it? I mean, for me, I work in retail, so it's been peculiar because I've worked through the whole of this pandemic, whatever you want to call it, and it's been strange, hasn't it? So what are people's opinions then? What are the myths out there about coronavirus? What are the if you want conspiracy theories about it?
Well, obviously one of the conspiracy theories that was sort of bandied around was that it was sort of government manufactured. It was sort of North Korean or South Korean. Depending on who you listen to. And then they said, why were there some places in this country that were affected by it? Why were there nowhere in sort of China or Korea or, so why were their main cities not really affected the same as ours were? And so there was lots of sort of myths around the fact that it was sort of a government lab that had been, there'd been an accident and it got out. And one quite interesting one was actually it was sort of Korean led, and that actually they'd sent effectively human carriers over to the Western world, and genuinely stories of like sci-fi, literally just like, spy films and stuff, human carriers and all this sort of stuff. So that was stuff, but I say you go online and you read some of the conspiracy theories. For me, look, I probably still don't know where it actually originated. Was it in a food market? Is that the general consensus?
A wet market in Wuhan, and they've allegedly narrowed it down to one specific individual who ate a bat.
Oh, is that what it was?
Allegedly.
Right.
Again, I find that a little bit difficult to buy into, that they could be that specific about an incident. So I suspect that one is a manufactured story. Yeah. Again, potentially political in terms of the mass media wanting to form our opinions on China, that they are the bad guys. So I'm always a little bit suspicious when I hear things like that. But you mentioned there that it's manufactured. Is there any part of you that believes that it could be, Andy?
I don't know. There's always some element. Any life is an element of truth to it. So
you're losing you there, dude.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like that market's been open probably hundreds of years as well.
Mm.
How all of a sudden it's just had this COVID thing. I don't know. But you never know.
What was interesting though was that there was I think he's American, an author, was it Dean Koontz, who wrote a story about a global pandemic, and he called it, I can't remember the number, but it was like Wuhan 11 or Wuhan 14 or whatever. And this story was written by Dean Koontz years and years ago, and it talks about a global pandemic originating in, and I don't think in the story, I haven't read the story, so I don't think it was in Wuhan, but he called it Wuhan 11 or Wuhan. And you're thinking, like, really? That's like a hell of a coincidence. That like a real coincidence that is. It's like he's written a story about this sort of agent, this virus, whatever it may be, sweeps the whole world. He's called it Wuhan 11, 12, 13, whatever the number was. And then years and years later, actually, a virus very similar to his story is discovered in a place called Wuhan. So you're a little bit like, well, that's a bit freaky. Like, how does that happen?
Well, Dan Brown's book a few years ago, Inferno,
yeah.
That pretty closely followed this pattern as well, didn't it? Of a virus that was started spreading through a water system.
And you look at something like, going back to something like Stephen King, was it The Stand? So that was a virus that swept, nations and stuff. And you go back through literature, and you go back through sort of films, and there's always stories about state-funded sort of biological weapons and nerve weapons and all of that sort of stuff. So I don't quite subscribe to it being that, and it being a chemical weapon or a biological weapon or whatever it may be from the Chinese government aimed at somehow unsettling the West or whatever. But you couldn't help but think that when they were talking about like Shanghai and places like that, like where the Chinese government sit, where the Chinese military sit, there were like no cases. So literally, like, no Chinese politician got ill, no Chinese military leader got ill. Yet, obviously, thousands of miles away, various Western world leaders were ill. And you're like, really? Like, and as I say, I don't subscribe to that. But obviously, it's a story that the conspiracy theories out there, they obviously latched onto this and they were like, it has to be this. You know, why can a city that's only 50 kilometers away have no impact whatsoever, yet cities that are like thousands of miles away have like thousands of people dying type thing? Do you know what I mean?
Well, the thing about a conspiracy theory is they appear when a simple course of events is difficult to accept. If you think, apply this one to Princess Diana, there are multiple conspiracy theories about that. Yeah. However, in all likelihood, it was just a very unfortunate accident. But the fact that someone that central, that controversial to the royal family could just simply perish in a car accident is difficult to accept, which is why conspiracy theories exist about that. But for me, the key thing about this is if a government were to engineer an illness or a virus, or call it what you will, you would imagine that they would do it so that it would affect the people who draw from the pot, leave the people who contribute to the pot virtually untouched and unscathed, leave the children, touch wood, unaffected. So that for me is, I think if it is a conspiracy theory, I think that probably is the fact that is where it stems from, is that there's a lot of misinformation. And it started off with literally having to tell people, and it started, the media was telling us that the young are largely unaffected by this, and then that storyline changed when, if you were fortunate enough to be younger than us, you felt like you had a free license to go out and do what you wanted. Yes, there's a danger you could pass it on to people, but when you're young, you're fearless, aren't you? Yeah. So the story learning how to change that. And I think as soon as you start manipulating information like that, and that for me has been, this whole thing has been a manipulation of figures and of information. And there's part of me that doesn't like to see that. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Andy?
That's how it is, isn't it, with the outlets? It's always something that suits them rather than factual figures.
Yeah, it's a narrative, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. I saw something the other day saying it's like kill rate is like 0.6%. It's like that's nothing. There's a lot. It's like accountants can do it. Government's really tight. It's massaging figures to show you're like right and what's wrong. Yeah. Could have like an actual infection number, kill number, and all that stuff. But then depending on how you present that data.
Yeah. I mean, was it Mark Twain, lies, damn lies and statistics? So. And interestingly enough, and obviously for some of our American listeners and viewers, there was quite a bit that come on social media with sort of Trump trying to sort of defend America and how they've handled it. And so we might get into sort of social media sort of down the line. But that was quite humorous, and whereas the interviewer was trying to not spin it, but he was trying to present the figures in one way. And because that didn't actually paint a very favourable picture of America, Trump was trying to spin it in a different way. And actually they're effectively the same set of figures, but I think Trump was trying to say it was deaths per infection rate, and the interviewer was like, well, that's fine, but I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about it's deaths per population. Trump's like, well, you can't do that. So it just shows, like, as Andy said, it's the narrative, I suppose. But I sort of feel a bit sorry for the government, I suppose, in as much as I actually don't think it would have mattered whether Labour were in, Conservatives were in, whoever were in. It's absolutely unprecedented. We've gone through 2 world wars, and obviously got all the relatives and stuff that have sort of fought in the wars and subsequently passed away and stuff. And older friends that have said, even when the war happened and they were kids, we were never locked down. We were never told we couldn't go anywhere. We were never told you can't go to the pub, you can't go to the park. Yeah, you might have had a threat of being bombed by the Germans, effectively, but there was no, like, you cannot go out. So it has been unprecedented from that point of view.
That's it. I mean, in terms of social distancing and the mask wearing, but prior to that, the lockdown, I know was difficult for people. Andy, where you're living now as well, you guys are locked down again, aren't you?
Thanks to a few districts, they've just got a big blanket thing. Everyone's in Manchester.
Yeah, I mean that's tough. I mean, I know there's members of my family who are potentially at risk and have had to lock down, and it's those that are alone have found it the most tough.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I'm glad to see the back of all the Zoom meetings and quizzes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it at first. The other thing that came out of it, every time you open up your phone, you had a meme or a GIF of somebody. Man, I was getting sick of that. I never thought I'd lose my sense of humour over those things.
It was, I mean, obviously, we've mentioned my old man, Big Grey, affectionately known as Big Grey. He lives alone. My mum passed a number of years ago. He lives alone, and he's found it pretty tough, really, because he's quite a social person. He enjoys going out, enjoys having a beer. He's very, very busy in terms of the local sort of dart scene, and he's chairman of a local sort of social club. So he found that. And I was amazed, actually, that he effectively self-isolated. When it first came out, he's obviously over 70. He was part of the group that told to self-isolate, and he did. And I was amazed that he did it. But he did find it hard. But, he found it hard. He lives on his own. And obviously, me and Sid, my brother, we would chat to him regularly, and, we'd sort of pop around, socially distance, and just say, do you need anything? Do you want anything? Do you want anything picking up from the shops or whatever? Because I think was it at the time one person was allowed to go shopping for you on your behalf or whatever. So he found it quite tough. And yeah, it was your heart went out really for those people who were on their own, and particularly maybe those people that didn't have a support network around them. That must have been extremely tough. So. I'm glad we sort of are coming through it now. Obviously, the worry is the second wave and all that sort of thing, but I'm sort of pleased that we've sort of relaxed the social distancing to a point where you can at least be in the same room as people, and you can go to their house and stuff. So that's good.
Well, the funny thing is, actually, we recorded those 2 beer episodes. Think of them what you will, but that was really the only opportunity that we got to do that with Andy, who's now locked back down again.
Yeah,
in the Greater Manchester area, which is quite peculiar, really. So, is there part of you that's a little bit more surprised that more people haven't questioned the lockdown in itself? They haven't sort of broken the rules? Because I am. The fact that you're told to do something, I've been a little bit disturbed that there aren't larger groups of people just saying, well, hang on a minute. Why is this just not some kind of social experiment in terms of social distancing? Are we not playing games with how people can be controlled? Because actually, I've been amazed how easy people have been to control, and how much I've literally been controlled myself into thinking now, I don't want to go out. I don't want to go to the pub. I can tell you, I've not thought.
I haven't thought that for about 30 years.
30 years, exactly.
Absolutely.
I'm telling you,
but it is strange because you go through history, and you go through, in particular, some British history, and you always seem to get whether it be your left wing or your right wing movements in terms of your anti-establishment, your anti-government, your anti-whatever it may be, and I don't think there has been for COVID. No. I don't think there's been I don't think there's been a sort of a swell of opinion in as much as actually, why is the government trying to do this to us? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think you've got maybe some very prominent sort of professors or scientists or whatever that maybe have spoken out against how the government have handled it. But in terms of having thousands of people walking the streets protesting and stuff, I don't know. I don't think there has been, really.
No, I've been surprised that people have just seemed to accept it.
Yeah.
And I've accepted it. I mean, even to the point now, I see people walking. Obviously, you come in my shop, you are legally bound, theoretically, to wear a mask. And about 50% of people do. And I can feel the anger in my belly towards the 50% that don't.
But is it the fact that, and I'm just throwing it out there, and I've just thought about it, is it the fact that people are aware that it isn't just our government and actually it's a global thing? And had it just been a UK outbreak and the UK government was saying, you can't go out, you can't do this, would that have made people more more of a movement against the government, is what I'm trying to say, as opposed to actually people realise that it's not just the UK government, it's the American government, it's the Australian government, it's the Spanish government, it's the Italian government, and it's a whole worldwide thing. I don't know.
But if you go deeper into that conspiracy theory movement, you look at people like the Illuminati and that 1% who effectively financially can control a government's policy. The people like Boris are effectively, if you want to believe it or not, a dog on a chain. And that's the question, is this a bigger experiment? We had the conversations from Bill Gates. Those videos have gone viral, haven't they? Talking about the next challenge won't be world war, it will be a pandemic.
Yeah. Biggest threat to the human existence was the virus, or is
yeah,
who said that? There's a famous quote. The big. I don't know whether it was Bill. Was it Bill Gates? It was Bill Gates. Yeah. Was it? Yeah, that's right. So yeah, you're probably right. It was interesting. Just thought. Then you're talking about. Is it the government? And obviously, was Boris ill? Was Boris made to be ill?
I don't.
Was that a sympathy? Oh, look, it can happen even to our prime minister, so it must be real type thing. Do you know what I mean?
You had situations like Prince Charles, 70-year-old man. I've got coronavirus. 2 days later, hey folks, I'm back talking to my plants. You got the people with the likes of Idris Elba. I've tested positive. Guess what? I'm fine. And these are stories out there that actually we needed people to take this seriously, potentially. You got Boris, who then I'm poorly. I know I could have died and back out. If I'm wrong, I apologise. But I just don't think I am on that one. I remember seeing a parody account for Boris Johnson on Twitter saying, I'm pretty sure Boris is trolling us because he's been, when his famous quote, well, I've been in the hospital and I've been shaking hands with coronavirus patients. It's like, gee whiz.
Yeah.
If you're telling us it's that contagious, you can't be that stupid.
No, I don't know. I don't know, I suppose, where I stand on that. And if he was ill, thankfully he's okay. That's another life that, he hasn't surpassed or whatever, so that's great. Do I believe he was as ill as possibly was initially sort of reported out? I'm not so sure.
No. Let's face it then, and we've got a pretty good track record in this country of prime ministers not being assassinated. I think there's only one. I mean, many, many years ago, there's a statue to him now. I forget his name, but he was shot just outside the gates of the House of Commons. Pretty easy way to get to Boris then, just stick something on your hands, telling you're ill, and he'll shake it.
Absolutely, yeah. And why foreign governments have maybe thought about that. But yeah, that's obviously, happy days. So yeah, I mean, obviously that was, the COVID thing has been and will continue to be a huge element of the year of 2020 so far. And it's funny because when I was talking to my girls and they were saying, what are you going to record and what's the topic? And they said, oh, well, other than all of our individual birthdays and Christmas, you might as well just write 2020 off because it's been rubbish, sort of thing. And that, and it does make you wonder whether or not is that the general. I mean, my daughters are 15 and 13, so is that the general consensus is that actually, this year's just been pretty crude, and therefore we just got to write it off. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
I think so, and I've sort of seen it with my kids as well. Tilda's 3. And she was affected by it first. We're getting out and about now, and other than an incident in a shoe shop where someone came out in full PPE and tried to measure her foot, and caused the meltdown to end all meltdowns. Not too bad, but JJ obviously very, very formative. It was, turn one in lockdown. We couldn't have family around to celebrate.
Yeah.
Literally, we had the doors open, and if you wanted to come and say hello to him, you could come and stand in our back garden and do it. And he's been affected by it more so. He is so clingy on Kim now because that's all he's had.
But it does make you wonder, and I'm sure that various scientific establishments and research establishments are doing, effectively have started a study on the effect of COVID in terms of pre-adolescents or babies or whatever the age group is, just in terms of the social interaction they would have with other kids, the social interaction they would have with other adults, and has that affected? And I'm not saying, I don't know whether it has, I don't know whether it hasn't, but it would be interesting to see whether or not there has been some form of, not delay, but like an effect on individual babies and very young children in terms of how clingy they are to an individual, as opposed to actually they're okay with a number of individuals. So for example, JJ, he's very clingy with Kim. Would he have been as clingy if me and Andy and Amy and everybody and parents and grandparents would have been over more regularly? It's that type of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, Tilly, like she's very tactile. She always wants to go over and grab other people. Yeah. Sometimes strangers, they find it peculiar. But that's where I've really noticed a difference. But I'm going to chuck a couple more conspiracy theories then at you. So what about this one, which is one of the ones that I dismissed almost instantly, that it's caused by 5G?
I think I would say no. The link between 5G and in particular the UK 5G network with Huawei.
Correct.
Andy will know. Huawei. Huawei. Yeah. So, and I think.
Stop laughing at us.
I think good old Mr. Trump sort of stirred up anti-Huawei sort of sentiment, didn't he? In as much as he felt as though it was a platform for the Chinese government to sort of spy. And actually, he was quite vocal on the UK's decision to give the tender to Huawei for the 5G. So, you know what? Not for me. I don't buy it.
Do you buy into that one?
It's just happened when 4G came out as well.
Just on this, obviously, because we did the paranormal episode a while back, and obviously you were branded as the skeptic in that episode. You were given a title. So generally, then on conspiracy theories, where do you sit with those as a rule? Just dismiss them as bunkum, or buy into them more believable?
Like I said, behind every lie, there's some element of truth. So. Say the 5G thing, I don't think there's anything in it. I think some people maybe don't know about what's involved in telecommunications or something like that. They're afraid of that. I don't know. No, I don't really buy into that. The 5G thing. The possibility that China could be spying on everyone through that's a possibility, because you never know these days. But I don't buy it.
I just find it difficult to believe that there's the state-sponsored, government-sponsored, wide-scale spying on other countries. Don't get me wrong, I do think there is a massive element of espionage, and there was the Russian involvement in, was it the UK? There was rumours about Russian involvement in the UK elections or whatever it was, and that somebody had hacked some figures from the UK database or something recently. So, you hear stories that it has gone on. Would they be as brazen as to say, actually, Huawei, if is effectively the business front of the Chinese government, and they are state-sponsored spying? I don't know. Look, if I'm wrong, hey, the Chinese government, hey, I apologise or whatever, but I don't I don't see it. I think smaller scale, and I'm not talking about your typical quintessentially sort of James Bond English sort of 007 spy stuff, but I do think that type of espionage, counter-espionage goes on. But yeah, whole scale, widespread state sponsorship, not so sure. Not so sure, if I'm honest.
The other one then, the other conspiracy theory is obviously the vaccine, when it comes along, is merely a way of microchipping our citizens. Well, do we?
Wow, you've been delving into Google a lot.
I have been on Google a lot, and just for a change, I've not been on my normal subjects. I've gone to this.
On a slight, in terms of microchipping humans, I genuinely think that's coming. I genuinely think, effectively, however many years in the future, you won't need a phone to pay with something or a wallet. You will have a chip in your arm and you will just scan. I genuinely think that.
I got a little story about that.
Go on.
Guy I work with's got an RFID chip in his hand.
Really?
So he's automated a lot of stuff in his house, like his doors and windows, and like, I don't know what, Google or Alexa or something like that. So when he walks up to his front door, he's got his little chip in his hand, and he just like puts it on the back of it, and it unlocks. And
seriously, I'm telling you, that's coming. Honestly, that's coming. Well, years and years and years ago, and I'm sure my uncle won't mind me saying this, and I don't think it came off, but he worked on. There was a company in South Africa that pioneered it, and the keyless entry to a car, and effectively where you've got your car handle, you put your hand under your car handle, and it would read your fingerprints, and it effectively would unlock your car. So you didn't need a key, you didn't need a fob, and literally you would just put your fingers underneath it and it would unlock. So I think the personal identification, you're only going to look at our laptops with your facial recognition to unlock laptops. I mean, it's there, the technology's there. They just haven't refined it, I don't think, enough. I wonder whether or not you get to a point where, okay, you've got your Apple Pay or whatever, and it says, right, Apple Pay, and you look at your screen, and it recognises your face, and says, right, your payment's gone through. Both of those technologies are live at the moment.
If we do that, you need to get all the James Wade's phone. Tell you what, I bet he's done all right, that lad.
Yeah. I wish I'd have his bank account. But both of those technologies are there, aren't they? You've got facial recognition, which is there, and you have wireless bank transfer technology, which is there. So it doesn't take. Sorry, Andy, go on.
So yeah, technology is here, but you have to the acceptance might not be, so they have to phase it in slowly. And it's contactless. I remember bank cards doing it say 10 years ago, and it was like, oh no, you don't want that. You got to put in a like a Faraday cage or whatever in your pocket and all this stuff. And now it's like everyone does it, don't they? Contactless. And now phones do it, and it's just time. I think technology is always going to be brought in slowly.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? And again, this is one I more or less dismiss. I do apologise. Dismiss straight away. It being the vaccine being a way of getting the chip into people. I can't see it myself. I just can't see it.
I can't see it.
Too far-fetched.
Yeah. I think separately, the vaccine, yes, I think we need, and the RFID, if that's what it's going to be, technology, yes, I think that will come. But is the vaccine the carrier that enables you to then have that? Not so sure.
I think some people need to be microchipped. That's a separate conversation.
That most definitely is. So, would you guys happily then now, Bill Gates rocks up at your house, stick your hand out, Gary, stick your hand out, Andy, chunk, Futurama. Would you take that microchip? Obviously, the guy who Andy works with, I find that crazy, I
think you would obviously need to understand the various protocols in terms of which systems talk to which systems and which systems talk to your arm or your elbow or your hand or wherever it is. And obviously you've got security measures that I would need to be convinced are in place, because obviously you don't want to walk around and wave your arm around the air and everybody's getting hacking into your hand and effectively getting access to your bank account. Yeah, you know what I mean? So I would need to be convinced in terms of the security protocols. But yeah, I think it's going to happen. How long in the future it's going to happen, I don't know. But yeah, I think it's going to happen. And I don't think there's anything that anybody can sort of do to stop that. I think the advancement of technology is here to stay. Andy made a great point. Years ago, everyone was like, "Oh my God, I'm not going to do contactless. I've got to keep everything, hidden, and I want to put my card in and put my PIN number in." And now everyone's just like, boop, boop, and you've got your Apple Pay and you've got all sorts of wireless ways of paying. It's like technology's here, so it's just about how you get the populace to embrace it, I suppose. Which is exactly what Andy's just said. It's just how do you get to do that?
So I think we've summed up coronavirus in 2020. There's another news story which we talked about earlier, which arguably is a little bit more controversial, isn't it? That has happened. It's been on the agenda now for a month or two, and that is the Black Lives Matter movement. Who wants to catch that hand grenade?
Go on then, Andy. You go first.
It's not a subject I like to talk about. I think it's weird that this sort of stuff is still happening in 2020. So when I was in the army, like 2001 onwards, there was all different races, different people from like all different Commonwealth countries, parts in Asia, Caribbean, and everyone's got along. It was great. You could say, obviously, there's no filter, so you could swear at someone, but you wouldn't. It was never racial or gender or sexual preference and stuff like that. And that was like 20 years ago now, which is it's a bit of a joke, and we're still talking about like racial matters. I think it's just insane. I mean, being white, middle-aged, I'm probably like the worst. I don't know what stereotype they'll say. Oh, you've never experienced it. Being ginger, I have experienced it, but not on the degree everyone else has. But I just find it weird that it's still happening. I mean, in this country, from my observations and people I spoke to, like of different colours, ethnicities, and all that sort of stuff, they've not really had loads of it. They get like the odd group, but they're normally like the older people, aren't they? The older generations. But like this Black Lives Matter movement, there was all the protests for that. Was it a month or two ago? And it's just crazy that it had to happen. It just blows my mind that 2020 we're still talking about this sort of stuff. It should be dead and buried by now.
I think you're right, and I think historically, in particular, obviously in America, with what happened and their sort of slavery and that, and going back years and years and years, and I just don't see how, and I agree with you 100%. Why is it still an issue to me? Sort of every life matters. It doesn't matter whether you're black or you're white, or to me, every life matters. And I think it was, I might be wrong, but it was somebody like Samuel L. Jackson or Denzel Washington or something, and there was a newspaper headline. And the newspaper headline said, like, white cop holds black man down. And he said, that's the problem. Because he said the headline should be, cop holds man down. Yeah. So get rid of colour in whatever guise you... And part of it is how we report it, how we record it, how we discuss it. And literally the headline was, white cop holds black man down. And he went... And it struck a chord with me, thinking, actually, you know what, he's absolutely right there. Yes, the action was despicable and shouldn't have happened and all of that. But how we report that, and that's the written press, that's the social media and everything. And I'm obviously a massive sports fan. Love me sport. And Michael Holding, who is a West Indian cricketer, one of the greats, he did a piece, and if you haven't seen it, it proper is like hairs on the back of your neck. It's moving. He gets very emotional. He talks very, very passionately about it. Boils down in his mind to education and how we educate people. And he talks about some of the struggles that he faced growing up and stuff. And it's about 2 or 3 sort of interview montage, and it's quite recent, so it's a month old or whatever, something like that now, and it literally was like, and I remember watching thinking, wow, like somebody obviously who is black, who's obviously maybe has experienced it from a personal point of view, like he talks about it in such a way that he said it wasn't black lives, it was every life is important, and no life should be treated more or less important than any other life. Do you know what I mean?
Well, just to pick up on that though, and I get where people say that all lives matter, and all lives do matter. I'm not going to dispute that, but that statement of Black Lives Mattering came out from people who felt like they were suffering and they were being repressed, and that came, more so in America. I get that, the racial tensions there far stronger than anything that we've witnessed. And yes, we are, like Andy says, 3 middle-class white guys. We're not in the position to be judging any of this really, because other than obviously Andy hasn't really experienced anything like that. But the fact that Black Lives Matter exists as a statement means that these guys are feeling repressed by the situation, that they don't have the same opportunities available to them. Yeah. And yes, all lives do matter, but the statement Black Lives Matter came about, before all lives matter, because they're not saying only Black Lives matter. No, it's the voicing a concern that we can't tap into because we're not from that ethnic background.
And I get that, and if you throw it in a sporting context slightly wide, although it wasn't really called Black Lives Matter, but obviously you look at the Colin Kaepernick sort of taking the knee because he felt as though there was sort of differences in how people of different sort of races were treated, and he took a knee, and obviously he got pelters for that, like literally, like he was ostracized effectively.
Yeah, he was.
And I it would be interesting now to see, and obviously if there are any American sort of listeners or stuff they want to get in touch, how is Kaepernick perceived now that sort of the Black Lives Matter sort of movement has not got bigger?
Just following on Twitter, you see a lot more sympathy for his cause.
So
I'll be dead honest. I was a bit dismissive of that news story when it first came about, and I thought, actually, do you know what? He isn't the best quarterback. Maybe that's the reason why. Yeah, he's not bad.
Yeah,
but
one really great season. But
one exceptional season. And after that, really didn't achieve a great deal. And is that the reason why he's not getting offered a contract rather than his
stance? Yeah.
And you sort of see the backlash from that now. You think, maybe I was wrong on that one, because when I looked at it and I thought, so I tweeted about it from my own personal account. Someone got back to me and said, you're not telling me he's not better than some of the, the standings. And I thought, you know what? I'm looking at Steelers fan. No disrespect, Landry Jones. I know he went and played in the XFL, but I'd have taken
You'd have taken Kaepernick, yeah.
I'd have had to go myself over Landry Jones.
Yeah, sorry, and you wonder whether or not. So him taking the knee highlighted various sort of social misgivings that he had and perceptions that people treated it. And I know he's quite, from the UK, I know he's quite a controversial character, but you look at someone like Danny Rose, who has been very vocal about the racism that he's been subjected to, not only on the field. If for our American listeners, Danny Rose is an England football international, played for Spurs for a number of years, and he speaks quite openly about the racism that he's received on and off the field. And he said recently, like a couple of days ago, that when he goes back to, I think it's from Doncaster, so when he goes back to Doncaster, he's regularly pulled over by the police, effectively because he's a young black guy driving a decent car and he just gets pulled over. And that's, and he said, I've got to the point now that whilst I don't accept it, I have to live with it, because every time I go back, I get pulled over. And that there was something popped up on social media, was it today or yesterday? And I think he was an ambulance worker, I think he might have been off duty maybe, and he was a black guy who was driving a BMW and he got pulled over by the police. And this video on social media has surfaced about him questioning, well, why did you pull me over? I've just seen 15 other cars driving past and you haven't pulled any of them over. So why have you pulled me over? And the policeman was like, well, effectively, I'm entitled to pull over whoever I want to pull over. And he was like, but can you tell me the reason why you pulled me over? And basically the subtext was he was a black guy driving a powerful BMW car, and that leads to all sorts of various social perceptions of, so, you know, and that's happening.
Yeah. Oh, it is. And you hit the nail right on the head with how you started off this, is the way that the media reported this was a black guy has been killed by a white man.
Yeah.
The colour and race was brought into it, and that was a concern. And then that was countered by the strangest graph I have ever seen in my life, where it was a graph of black people killed by white people killed by black people killed by black people, white people. And I thought, why does that graph need to exist, that we break this down to race? Because the problem isn't race, it's socio-economical background. And if that is the case, then maybe are we actually saying that the opportunities that are available to us are not available to others? Is that the question?
I mean that's a massive statement. I don't know whether that is the case. I mean, there was something that came up of, and I've been making the numbers up, but there was a story that said, let's say there was only 10 out of the top 200 chief executive officers in big British companies came from an ethnic minority. You're like, you know, there was a massive disproportion of black ethnic sort of business leaders, and again, being very sporty, you only have to look at the number of black or ethnic minority football managers, cricket managers, coaches, you know, and so, but then look at the percentage of players. So when you look at the percentage of players, black players and white players in sports, and then look at the percentage of black or white managers, coaches, people that hold sporting director roles, massive disproportion. So that's a question. That's a great question.
Yeah. I'm not answering it.
It's a great question,
and I'm not in a position to answer.
No, I'm not in a position to. And what's interesting, I mean, obviously working in schools, and before the school that I work at now, I worked in mainstream, and we would quite regularly have lads that would have a tear up, and one happened to be white and one happened to be black or Asian or whatever. And you got various people saying, oh, it's racist, and it's like, well, it isn't. They're just two lads that generally don't like each other and had a set to. Actually, the fact that one's white and one's black doesn't come into it. It's not. They didn't stop fighting because they're racist. They started fighting because they didn't like each other, and people were very quick to jump on that bandwagon of, well, it must be racist. There must be racial undertone. If it's one white lad and one Asian lad, or one white lad and one black lad, you know, Afro-Caribbean lad or whatever, they were very quick to jump, well, it must be racist. And it's like, well, no, it isn't, because he's an alpha male and he's an alpha male, and they just basically had a set to see who actually is the top dog. And race really hasn't got anything to do with it. But again, it was how it was reported, that it was a white lad, an Asian lad, a white lad, a black, an Afro-Caribbean lad, whatever it may be. And it was reported in that way to the senior leaders at the school or whatever.
Which is what Andy started off by saying, that it doesn't make any sense.
No.
And I'd like to think, for the vast majority of people, that somebody's race, somebody's culture makes no difference to anybody.
I hope, and while we talked about sort of coming out of COVID, I hope that, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, and I hope that we get to a point where actually, if there is a social injustice or whatever, if there is, we get to a point where people are aware of that, and we start to redress the balance. Because actually it should be, if you're talking about a footballing point of view or a business CEO, it's the best person for the job and the right person for the job, irrespective of the colour of their skin. If you can do that job and you can do that job better than anybody else, it shouldn't matter. Now, you asked a great question, and I suppose that's the crux of it, is But to get to that point of being interviewed for CEO, are there more hurdles that are put in front of somebody that comes from a black or ethnic minority race as opposed to a white person? Are the opportunities more widely available? Or is it a socioeconomic thing whereby your more privileged people get the opportunity and your less privileged people don't? And therefore, are we saying that generally less privileged people are black and Afro-Caribbean or Asian? Or I'm not saying that because I don't think that's the case, but
if you look at murder rates in those socio-economic backgrounds, certainly the more deprived people are forced to take action to feed their family, and they will go down a more criminal route because that is sometimes the only opportunity available to them. I'm not saying that is the case based on your colour, but if you're poor, the opportunities that are available to you are very different to if you come from a background.
And that's a historical thing. So if your grandparents were poor, your parents were poor, and you are surrounded by that environment. So are we saying therefore that your environment is more of a guidance and your socioeconomic grouping is more of a guidance as to the opportunities as opposed to actually it's the race of you as a human being?
I think, that is the case, and it should,
And if that is the case, is that right?
It's certainly never
right.
It's
not right, is it? Really,
the opportunity should be available to
everybody.
And then, I hate this. It's going off the slang. Whenever I see an offer is exclusive, I hate that word because it excludes people.
Yeah,
and that bugs me. But that's a slight distraction from that. But yeah, that's my question. Is that the circumstances? Are we qualified to answer that? Hell no.
Hell no.
We are not qualified to
not
answer
at all, no.
But the one thing when I look at this, and those are the two major news stories of 2020, is they're both very divisive. They divide people, whether it's physically, in terms of locking people down, keeping people away from family and friends and those that we love. That's certainly been the case in 2020 in terms of coronavirus. That's what's happened. I find myself judging people who won't wear a mask out in public into my shop. I find myself questioning other people, and that has been implanted into my mind by the thoughts and actions of others. And then we come to the Black Lives Matter movement. That's exactly the same thing, where what we have is a police officer has murdered. That's what it was. It was murder. He has murdered an individual, and race has been brought into it. So it's been made divisive by the way it was reported.
Yeah.
And both of those things, for me, are the media and the spin that it's put upon it. And that's what troubles me most.
It would have been interesting, and I'm not belittling any of the incidents that have happened, but had the police officer killed a white kid by kneeling on his neck, so a white police officer kills a white kid by kneeling on his neck, would there have been as much publicity? Would it have been reported in the same way?
You'll never know, will you?
You don't know, do you?
Although it's probably happened, and it probably
has happened, and as you say, three middle-aged guys from the UK trying to sort of, and I can only talk about what I've seen into how it's been reported in the UK news, and obviously the social media, you do get snippets of what's been reported from other countries, but it's just what the UK news stations sort of report.
But as Andy started off by saying, that it's incredibly sad that this is still something that we're talking about.
Yeah.
How bizarre.
Why in the year 2020 should the colour of somebody's skin mean they're treated differently than anybody else? I don't get it. And I have friends who I work, one of my close colleagues at work is Asian. I've worked and have friends in the past that are Afro-Caribbean, that are Samoan, of different races, religions, cultures, beliefs. I don't treat them any differently because they're white, black, whatever it may be,
And why would you? And like going back to what Andy says at the start, although we made a joke about it, it is the same as treating somebody differently based on the colour of their hair.
Yeah.
But we know it happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is peculiar. But anyway, listen, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole.
No, and I've spoken of what we've just over an hour now, so I've talked about what my thoughts are, and if during this I have offended anybody from what I've said, I apologise. I say I don't. 3 middle-aged guys from the UK. I just felt that we need to talk about it just because it's been
100%.
It's been so prevalent in 2020 in terms of it's been on the news, and it's one of the 2 major news stories of the year. It's the COVID 100%. And the Black Lives Matter thing. So I'd like to think I've put my point forward. I hope we get to a point where in society everybody is treated and everybody has the same opportunity to achieve, to earn, to be a success.
We're not there yet, though, are we?
Irrespective of
we're not even there in terms of gender.
No, we're not.
Male and female.
No, we're not. No. But that's the hope. That's the hope, is that actually the best person for that job should be the best person for that job, irrespective of their sex, their gender, their sexual preference, whatever it may be. It should be the best person for that job.
I mean, it's something I feel strongly about, and if I've offended anybody by anything I said, then I apologise. I don't mean to upset people, but these are just my thoughts.
Yeah.
This has been a much more serious episode.
Not somber, but I think we needed to do it.
Yeah, totally. 2020 has been a somber and morose year, so we it's reflected upon us, and we share that back with you guys, no doubt about it. We'll do something more upbeat next week. Don't you worry about that. So let's.
One of the biggest topics of 2020.
Go on.
Gin.
Vimto. Just for 1 second, I thought you were going to talk about. No, I thought you were going to talk about Arsenal winning the FA Cup.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, all the beef I got off you guys about Arsenal being a terrible team and the worst team that we've got in 30 years.
I'm not being funny, but you're shouting as though the FA Cup is like the best thing since sliced bread. Chelsea couldn't be arsed. They just finished 4th. That was their FA Cup. That's it. They're in the Champions League. Irrespective. That's not what I saw. You know what I mean? What I saw. But no, what was fun.
That is one of the most things we've had feedback about. Is Andy's drinking one.
Lockdown must have hit some people hard. They're drinking gin and Vimto.
That for me was the quote of it all. Lockdown must have hit some people hard. I love that.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I can't drink gin and tonic at all. So
no, absolutely cheeky Vimto.
I'm the other way around. I can't drink Vimto.
No. And Dave, if you're listening, then we apologise to Vimto, but the gin was lovely and the vodka was lovely, so it's all good.
It's no detriment to the gin that was supplied. It's more my taste buds to it.
Yeah, questionable taste buds. Cool then. Do you want to say your goodbyes, Andy?
See you later. And look forward to the next one. Harry Potter.
Same as me, as ever. Slightly different sort of flavour to the podcast tonight, and I say again, if I've offended anybody, I didn't mean to. It wasn't ever my intention to. Just trying to put my point of view across, and look forward to seeing you again, and we'll chat soon. Cheers.
Well, in the last couple of episodes, I've forgotten my tagline, but I've got a different one for you today, because if you've not noticed, I've got my Morrissey t-shirt on for this episode, and I make no apologies for that, Gary. So I'm just going to tell you to stop watching the news, because the news contrives to frighten you. Take care.